Hi guys, it's Jeanet and welcome back to my channel. Also, if you're new here, I post new videos every week, or at least I attempt to. Before we get into today's video, I do want to apologize if my voice sounds a bit strange, but the cold from last week has gotten steadily worse and now I feel like I'm at death's door. But we're gonna continue with the video anyway. So today, as promised, I'm going to be doing basically a video essay on Barbie, and yes, you read that title correctly. I'm basically going to be giving my completely biased opinion on why I think the rebranded Barbie movies aren't as good as the original Barbie movies. Okay, for the sake of clarity, I'm defining the rebranding from the movie Barbie Presents Thumbelina. The reason for why I'm drawing the line here, even though I personally felt the true charm of Barbie was last seen with the Island Princess, is because of the very clear shift in the animation style, delivery, and world in which Barbie is placed. With that out of the way, let's dive right into it. So, as stated, the animation style changed drastically, and I personally didn't really appreciate it. To be fair, I do think I have a tendency to be adverse to change, since I really despise the change that Ben 10 had gone through with animation throughout the years. But then again, I really liked what they did with Tangled, so make of that what you will. I think what frustrated me is the fact that it felt like a very clear attempt to rebrand and to pander to the younger audience in a way that I didn't really think was necessary or effective. Before anyone tries to use this to defend the change, it is completely possible to update the quality of an animation without changing the style of the animation. This can literally be seen in almost every single sequel ever, including things like The Incredibles 2, Shrek, Finding Dory, Toy Story 3, etc, etc. With that shallow problem out of the way, I quickly want to focus on the music, which I felt was another important part of the Barbie movies. So for those of you who haven't watched Barbie 5,000 times over, yet you're still here for some reason, the original Barbie movies had mostly classical music as their scores. And for me, that has two major benefits that, in my opinion, I don't see the rebranded Barbie movie music having. The first benefit is I think that it introduces kids to classical music and unconsciously helps them broaden their knowledge of music. I'm not even exaggerating when I say that every time I hear the Nutcracker soundtrack, or even when I hear Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, I immediately think of Barbie and the Nutcracker and Barbie and the Magic of Pegasus. The nostalgia connected to these movies are incredibly strong, and I think that kind of benefits Barbie in a way, because every time I do hear this music, I immediately want to go back and watch those movies again. The second thing is that I think it helps to keep the movie feeling pretty timeless. And that's basically just because classical music, or the music that we currently know as classical music, has been around for so long that it's almost disconnected with the modern times. And that's because you could have literally used that music in the 1980s, the 2000s, or even today, and it would still be quote-unquote relevant. In contrast, in my opinion, the rebranded music is so dating to the content that it is connected with. All of the songs that are used in the rebranded Barbie movies are so decidedly pop, and please don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be a music snob here. I personally love pop, but it's interesting because I know for a fact that pop from 2007 and pop from 2017 sound very different when put next to each other. Most of the time you can actually hear round about what time a pop song was released by just listening to it. And that for me is the core of why I think the pop music is so dating when connected to the movie. So in my opinion, that is strike 2 when it comes to outdatedness in terms of the rebranded movies. And then we come to the setting of the movies. Now I will fully admit I think this might be the most subjective point of the entire video, but personally I think they had something really great with the first few movies where they had Barbie basically telling a story to a young girl in an unspecific time that you could reasonably place anywhere in the last 40 years if you really wanted to. And then you had most of the rest of the story taking place in a more or less medieval setting. I really enjoyed this personally, as in some weird ways it made the magical elements feel more real, if I can say it that way, because the medieval time is largely associated with myth and legend, so it just felt like it made sense and once again offered a timelessness that I think strengthened the story that might have otherwise aged rather quickly. Okay, next I quickly want to address Barbie's character in the old movies versus the new ones. For me, the problem with the way they handle the new Barbie versus the old Barbie is the way they handle the potential Mary Sue-ness of her character. Now, don't get me wrong, Barbie has always been one of those almost perfect characters, much in the same way that most Disney princesses are kind of perfect, and I get that, but the difference comes in with how this perfection is handled. So in the original movies, Barbie's princess syndrome wasn't really acknowledged, and I think because of that it was okay. Now don't get me wrong, I understand the need for the princess syndrome, as I'm not calling it, because I understand that like the Disney characters, these characters are meant to be kind of a ideal version of a person. They're meant to be role models for young girls who still don't really know who they are and how they want to approach life. But I think that the problem comes in with the rebranded movies and the way that they then acknowledge how awesome Barbie is in each and every movie, instead of trusting the audience to decide that she's awesome all on their own. Because of course all the characters have to acknowledge how awesome Barbie is, because that is the defining characteristic of someone being awesome, is other people noticing that. And it's in no way meant to be a way to stroke the creators and the fans' egos. In the same way, there is this undertone of antagonism between girls that really rubbed me the wrong way. I will admit there is something of an instance of this in the old Barbie as well, when Nori starts off not liking Barbie because she thinks the guy she's in love with is in love with Barbie. But I think the reason why I was willing to give it a pass back then was because that was the only instance of it happening in the old Barbie. Whereas with the new Barbie, it really is a bit of a trend, and I just don't think sending young girls the message of that someone is evil if they don't like you and can only be redeemed when they see the light and start liking you is a good message. It's actually pretty unrealistic. I would much rather have there be a message of sometimes people aren't going to like you and you'll be forced to be the bigger person until the end, because even though that sounds kind of sad, it is also a lot more realistic, and I do think in fact that it is something that they showcase quite well with the relationship between Rapunzel and Gothel. Next on my list of gripes is Ken. Now before you say anything, hear me out. One of my favorite things about Disney, and yes, I am comparing Barbie with Disney because in my opinion Disney is Barbie's main competitor, I think, is the fact that Disney doesn't show any cynicism when handling their characters for the children's enjoyment. And I think that is very important because of course as adults and even as teenagers we know that our metaphorical Prince Charmings won't be just around the corner. They might not show up for years, if it's even something that you're still interested in at all. And I just think that kind of cynicism isn't something that is needed for children of 5 to 9 or even 12. I don't understand why they feel the need to try and belittle a romantic relationship, because even though you frame it in the "oh, we're still young and this doesn't have to mean forever" way, it feels very forced, because we all know that the rest of Barbie is based around realism, so why not the state of the relationship as well? And then there's also the issue of how they felt the need to downplay and in some cases almost belittle Ken in an attempt to make Barbie that much more appealing, which is a very odd choice and not a very healthy one at that. I'm sorry, but if you want to create an awesome character, she needs to be awesome enough that she should be able to shine despite the other characters' equal awesomeness, and not because of the lack thereof. Another pretty important thing that I think was handled differently when you compare the old Barbie movies to the new ones is the life lessons. And I will admit, obviously, I prefer the way that it was handled in the old ones, because in the old ones, in my opinion, they weren't shoved into your face, if I'm gonna put it plainly. You kind of didn't even know there was a life lesson attached to it until the end, and then if you were to rewatch it, all of it is kind of brought into perspective and it makes sense as a whole. Whereas in the new versions, Barbie's character is kind of set up for her arc from the very beginning, very clear cut, very cookie cutter, if you want to put it that way. And because it is so incredibly obvious what her lesson is going to be by the very beginning of the movie, it feels almost forced. Because yes, this is the path that Barbie has to walk in order to get from point A as a character to point B as a character. So it just feels very forced and by the numbers, and it kind of takes the fun out of it. Like, you know what she's gonna do, and you know probably what kind of path she's gonna walk, and of course as a child it's pretty fine to have that kind of arc and that kind of obviousness, but that's why in my opinion the new movies don't hold up past childhood, unlike something like, say, Zootopia, which has a very interesting plot, has dynamic characters, and is something that I still watch repeatedly and I enjoy as an adult. And I personally don't think that they're doing themselves a lot of favors, because with the rebranded things, it also has this kind of thing of it's already been done, because a lot of the lessons that they give in the rebranded movies, they've already handled in the old movies in a much more universal way and in a way that I personally prefer. So everything just ends up feeling like it's already been done. Speaking of already been done, it's time to address the elephant in the room, and that is Rock and Royals. I think this was the true height of sadness when Barbie ran out of ideas so much that they felt the need to remake one of their own movies, and not only that, not even do it well enough in my opinion that it could stand on equal footing with the original. I feel like it's the Disney conundrum before there even was a Disney conundrum, and that conundrum is that if you're not going to approach a thing from a different angle or improve on the original, then please just don't touch the original with a 10-foot pole to begin with. What's even more baffling is that I don't really know how they thought this would be a good idea, especially because it's such a clear overhaul of the original. There was, I think, one attempt at a homage to the original that was such a throwaway it might as well not have been there. Even worse, there were so many other things that they could have done instead. But no, they decided to revisit something that had already been done. And if I'm honest, I feel like that's the movie that marked the beginning of, shall we say, the end. Okay, now getting on to why I actually decided to do this very random looking video, and that is because I still actually have faith in Barbie. I have faith that they could come back from this and maybe become relevant again. I want to see that passion that they had at the beginning, the passion that led to them actually going and taping ballerinas to ensure that the way that they animated the dancers in something like the Nutcracker and Swan Lake to the best of their abilities, so that it actually mimicked the way that the real ballerinas did it. It's a kind of focus to detail that you really don't see that much of in the rebranding, and it's something that I really appreciated. I think if they actually went back to their roots and maybe did a new take on an old tale like they did with Rapunzel and with The Princess and the Pauper, or even went further back and did a new take on a ballet like they did with the Nutcracker and with Swan Lake, it could be so good, and it could maybe reignite that spark. I just really think they should look at putting more time and effort into making these the kind of animations that could last past childhood, because there's so many animations these days that adults go to watch all on their own, no kids attached, and I think that's an extremely important revenue that they're closing themselves off to. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. But in all seriousness, that is the end of my extremely long tangents. But if you did enjoy this, if you liked this very random passion-driven video, then please let me know in the comments below and consider liking and subscribing. I would really appreciate it. My Patreon and social media links will be in the description box below. Otherwise, I'll see you guys again next time. Bye. If you want to see me talk about how much I love Miraculous Ladybug next week, then be sure to subscribe and turn on that post notification, because yes, I'm excited for that video, and it's gonna give me life again after trying to recover from this illness.